Trails Through Daybreak 2 is not the Trails sequel that is going to be pushing the boundaries of the series. There are several good gameplay innovations and some great character work. That, to me, is the main appeal of Daybreak 2. A stronger gameplay system and more time with characters that we've known and loved for a long time, just got to know and already love, or have only just met. For those who don't like the slow pace of the Trails series, this game is not going to help your issues. For those who love that aspect and the deepening of the world and characters, you're going to have a whole lot to sink your teeth into with Daybreak 2. Quick disclaimer, if you have not played Trails Through Daybreak, I would recommend playing that game before watching this video. Daybreak 2 is not a game that should be your first game in this series, and this video is made with the assumption that you have played the first game, or at least are aware of the general concept of that game and how it works. With that out of the way, let's jump in. Trails Through Daybreak 2 is the 12th game in the interconnected Trails series developed by Nihon Falcom. It is the direct sequel to Trails Through Daybreak and continues the Calvard arc of the series. Daybreak 2 retains the hybrid combat system from the first Daybreak game. The game was released in Japan in September of 2022 for PS4 and PS5. A Windows port for China and Korea came in January of 2023, but the West had to wait until February 14th, 2025 for the game to be released here. The game is now available for PS4, PS5, PC, and Switch, with a demo available for PS4 and PS5 for people to try out. Before release, Daybreak 2 was mostly known as a very divisive entry in the series. I'll be talking about my own thoughts on the game, but does that hold up with critical and user reviews so far in the West? The data is mixed. On Steam, both Daybreak and Daybreak 2 hold a 92% positive score, but for critics, OpenCritic places Daybreak at a 91 critic score, while Daybreak 2 is at an 80. User reviews on platforms other than Steam are also much harsher for Daybreak 2, for some legitimate and not so legitimate reasons. Of course, as with all games, it is best to take these scores with a score of salt, but it does seem that Daybreak 2 has rubbed some people the wrong way. I still had a good time with the game though, so let's talk about why and what Daybreak 2 is about. Trails Through Daybreak 2 picks up a couple months after the events of Daybreak, with most of the members of Arkride Solutions scattered across Calvard on their own missions and journeys. Even Agnes has cut back on her hours in preparation for the big Aramis School Festival, which leaves Van by himself in the office with a brief chance to rest and recuperate. I say brief because this is Trails. We all know what's coming, and a knock on the door from Elaine Auclair disturbs that respite. A new threat has hit Calvard in the form of a red Grendel, mirror to Van's Grendel known as the Crimson Beast, that has been wreaking havoc. If that wasn't enough, it appears the beast also has the 8th Genesis that Van has been assisting Agnes in finding. With that out in the open, Van needs to team up with allies new and old to tackle this new threat and complete the original mission set for him in Daybreak. One of the twists when it comes to storytelling for Daybreak 2 is the adjustment in how the story is told. Much of the formula from Daybreak on gameplay is similar, but in certain cases over the chapters, you can have a divided chapter where Van is with a group, while Swin and Nadia take the place as the focus characters in another part of the chapter. You must play through both to advance with no particular order necessary. It's not exactly like what we saw with Trails into Reverie. What it does offer is a broader look at the events going on in Calvard while allowing smaller groupings to focus more on character development in the subsections. There is also another twist on the way the story is told, but that one is more spoilery, although I'm sure some of you are already aware from others about that particular twist. I'm generally in favor of Trails experimenting with how they tell their stories, but I will admit the way they chose to implement and justify it in Daybreak 2 was uneven. Not bad, but I think there were ways to capture the same feeling the writers and developers wanted to convey in a less convoluted way. I do like that the story allowed us the chance to see characters that didn't have as many chances to interact in the first game have important scenes with one another. Plus, Daybreak 2 gave us so many great Van and Elaine moments, I can never be disappointed with it for that. Structurally, the progression of the actual chapters does fit with the mold of what Daybreak had, with some adjustments. Instead of completing quests in Edith and then traveling somewhere else, Van and his crew generally start out somewhere else, complete some side quests, get the lay of the land, and then proceed on to main plot stuff. In the meantime, Swin and Nadia and their crew in Edith do the same. The alignment returns from Daybreak with different choices and quests giving Law, Grey, or Chaos points. You can still get new Hollow Cores depending on your focus, but unlike Daybreak, the alignment in Daybreak 2 has little to no bearing on the story itself. As the plot advances, this formula does change, but once again, spoilers as to exactly how that works. I like this format for the second game because it allows us to keep an eye on events in Edith as the capital and where a lot of characters we care about, both playable and not playable, reside. We also don't need to spend as much time introducing new locations because some are reused. However, some are new, and that was nice to see as we continue to expand our knowledge of this country. I'm really hoping for some cool new locations and trails beyond the horizon. Yeah, I got to change that voice line just before putting this video out because that announcement just happened. As for the combat, Daybreak 2 has a couple twists to add to the new hybrid system introduced in Daybreak. There are also some balancing adjustments that are notable enough that I'll mention them here since they were quite noticeable. As for additions, the first one comes into play when you do a perfect evasion in field battle. Upon the evasion, you can activate a cross charge, which switches to another character in your party to perform a strong attack to damage the enemies. Sometimes that can even break them, leading into the other new addition of the combat system, which you can execute during command battles called EX chains. When an enemy is broken in command battle, you can do an attack or craft along with an S boost, and as long as you are in range with an ally, you can activate an EX chain. Not only do you get your regular attack and craft in, you can then follow up with an attack from the character you're controlling plus their nearby ally. These can melt down an enemy's health, and you can keep doing them until the enemy recovers from being broken. I've had tough enemies go from half health to dead just because of EX chains, which may explain why it is harder to break enemies through command battle now, but hey, still a powerful new tool. Those tools are very helpful, especially with the new changes on the balancing front, because those are not as beneficial for the player as the new tools, and the main difference is the S-Craft recast delay. Yes, you can't spam S-Crafts with the same character for Daybreak 2 like you could for Daybreak. The combination of these additions and changes leads to a game that feels more balanced while retaining the challenge of previous entries. Yes, I do still think some of the bosses have particularly broken abilities, but as with any Trails game, you can also get some of your own, so it's a wash either way. There is one other field battle addition in Quick Arts that I honestly didn't use all that often. I could see it being useful if it also helped break enemies, but it didn't seem to do that, so I rarely bothered to use it. I hope that addition gets some adjustments in future games to increase its utility. Overall, I think this refinement suits the second entry of this gameplay style well. Expand, refine, and review, which is exactly what Daybreak 2 does. Out of all the hybrid systems that I have seen come around in the last few years, Daybreak still remains my favorite. The gameplay doesn't end there though, because unlike the first game, Daybreak 2 has plenty of side content for us to sink our teeth into, starting with the biggest part, the Märchengarten. Yes, that is how it is pronounced in-game. The Märchengarten is a series of procedurally generated levels that you can go through based around a certain theme. Complete the objectives of each level to keep advancing and collecting useful equipment, quartz, and the like. At the end, there is a big boss for you to face and defeat to get rewards. You don't need to complete each level more than once, but doing so several times will net greater rewards. You can use any party member that you have recruited during these missions, regardless of whether they are currently with your story party. There are a couple rare exceptions for very specific moments. This model gives you a chance to go wild with combinations, and you get rewards for doing so in the form of items and, the biggest part, skill stones that you use to upgrade characters' crafts. That's not all, as you can collect items that unlock certain costumes, music tracks, and other fun goodies during this mode. The Märchengarten has a nice set of options on rewards and what people can get from it. After its introduction, you don't actually have to engage with it apart from some side quests. If you do, you can get the aforementioned gameplay rewards and goodies, and there are greater rewards for those who want to go all out and do everything in it. I like this sort of addition and side content to the game, in which players can choose how much they engage with it without being punished main story-wise. Those who engage with it will be rewarded if they choose to take a trip to the garden, but it is not a requirement. Daybreak 2 also brings back mini-games in the form of the hacking mini-game, which you can use to unlock certain chests in the environment, as well as just for fun in the activities section of the Märchengarten. There's also a tailing mechanic in the main game that I'm including in this section just because it departs from the usual gameplay formula. It makes sense to include though because of Van and his team's line of work. Fishing makes its grand entrance to Calvard with a splash in a more accessible way than I think Cold Steel's version ever was. You can play a very basic game of one-on-one basketball. Come on, Falcom, where's that sports resort game? You know you want to make it. Then there is also the newest card game sweeping the nation in the form of Seven Hearts, which is an interesting combination where you're trying to deal damage to your opponents while also keeping enough cards because you get scored on both your remaining health and cards to win. I don't think it's as refined as Vantage Masters, but there's fun to be had there. I think that's the general description of a lot of the minigames. Fun, but not the deepest or most intricate. For those who aren't as fond of the minigames, the good news is that the only ones required at any point are the hacking and fishing ones, plus the tailing mechanic that's part of the main story. And even then, those are a rarity. The presentation of Trails Through Daybreak 2 hasn't shifted much from the first game, unsurprisingly. Even character outfits haven't changed from the first game, although the intermission does allow you the chance to see some outfit variety in the form of casual wear and swimsuits. The animation in the cutscenes continues to improve as Falcom grows more and more comfortable with the new engine, which is a delight to see. The new music tracks are enjoyable and well utilized to give more variety to the sound of the game with all the other reused tracks. Unfortunately, Daybreak 2 does keep the one person talking in a scene as voiced while everyone else is not voice acting from the first game, but it is not as frequent, so that is a minor win there. The UI and UX keeps up its quality, and that's honestly all I could really ask for. Sorry y'all, just not that much to talk about in the presentation section when it's pretty much Daybreak again. If you liked Daybreak's presentation like I did, you'll be fine with Daybreak 2. If you didn't, well, now you know that the issues you had will probably not be changed for this entry. The key word for Daybreak 2 critique has been progress. And it is true, Daybreak 2 does not progress the series in particularly notable ways either via story, gameplay, or presentation, and coming off of Daybreak, which did all of those, I can understand how the sequel would feel like a letdown. My enjoyment of the game, in spite of this, came from deepening character relationships and a more refined and balanced gameplay experience. I won't lie and say this is one of my favorite games in the series, but it is far from my least favorite. There's still more than enough Trails brilliance to keep me satisfied, and I'm sure that's the case for many of you as well. What did you think of Trails Through Daybreak 2? Let me know in the comments and give the video a like as you head down there. Subscribe if you have not already to keep up with my channel, and of course, future Falcom projects. We still have quite a few left in this year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Have a great day, and happy gaming.